Well, greetings to all of you as we gather here today, and greetings to all of you who are able to participate online as well. We are here at Sacred Heart Church in Mound City, Kansas, the shrine of Saint Rose Philippine Duchesne, on the feast day of Saint Rose Philippine Duchesne. I'm so happy to share with you today some about this shrine church. And also, we'll hear a little bit as well about the park about 20 miles from the shrine where the actual saint lived for a time in this area. St. Rose Philippine Duchesne is the first canonized saint of Kansas. She lived here for about a year in nearby this location, and I'm so happy to share with you a little bit more about that today. To be inspired by this saint, that we might be drawn a little bit more closer to God. I want to offer a special greetings to Susan. Susan became a consecrated virgin on this day last year, and so we rejoice to celebrate with her on the anniversary of becoming a consecrated virgin. We offer our prayers and support to you, Susan, on this very special day. We're so glad that you can be here as we gather in prayer and support and love for you in a special way on this day. I wish to extend a very special greetings as well to all our Catholic spiritual mentors who are taking part in this session today. My name is Father Barry Clayton. I also am a Catholic spiritual mentor, and so I'm happy to join with you as we reflect and journey through the life of this saint in a little bit more so today. This church, as I said, is in Mound City, Kansas, and it's currently in the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas. At the time, it belonged to the Diocese of Leavenworth, and the bishop was Bishop Schulte. Bishop Schulte decided to have this church built in honor of Blessed Saint Philippine after she was beatified by a Pope in 1940. After she was beatified in 1940, Bishop Schulte, here in the diocese at the time of Leavenworth, began the construction of this in honor of the Blessed that we would come to know and be inspired by, who lived very, very close to us. This was built in 1941 and dedicated in 1942. And it has served since that time as a place of a parish church for those who live in the nearby area. It has served as a parish church, and it also has served as a shrine for pilgrimages, for people to come and to visit and to be inspired by this saint. She was canonized by Pope John Paul II in 1988, and so now she is referred to from thenceforth as Saint Rose Philippine Duchesne. Our windows in the church here at Sacred Heart tell the life story of her, and so I'd like to share with you a little bit about her life. And those who are with us here present at the church today, if I could invite you to stand and walk with me as we journey from window to window. This first window shows Saint Philippine kneeling towards her Mother Superior. Her Mother Superior is Sophie Barrett, who is a canonized saint. She's now known as Saint Sophie Barrett. This is depicting her in France. Saint Philippine grew up in France. She was born in 1756. And as a little girl, there was a missionary that came and talked to her about the New World, about being a missionary in the New World to the Native Americans. And as a young girl, Saint Philippine had her heart full of love and on fire for God, to be a missionary in the New World and to bring Jesus to the Native American. And so ever since she was a little girl, she had that fire planted in her heart, inspired in her heart to go and to be a missionary for the love of Jesus and the New World, especially with the Native Americans. When she was a little girl, just shortly after that, she went to a convent, the Visitation Nuns, to get ready for First Communion. And it was there that she lived the life of a sister, praying with them, living their life, and she loved it. And she wanted to stay. She wanted to become a nun. Her dad, however, didn't quite understand the life and didn't support that at the time. Of course, she also was quite young at that time as well. And so she was asked to return back home. But finally, when she was a little older, she was able to go to the visitation nuns and join their community. Unfortunately, another tragedy struck in the French Revolution, and the Catholic Church, was heavily persecuted during the French Revolution. Her convent was shut down, and she was returned. She was forced to return back home. Finally, after some time, she was able to return back to the Visitation Convent, but the convent was in shambles and the community had been dispersed. She tried to gather people back together, but it was very difficult. It was very difficult for her to get things started and going back up. She eventually was able to merge with a brand new community getting started up by Mother Sophie Barrett. Mother Sophie Barrett had a brand new community called the the Society of the Sacred Heart. This society was just getting founded, and the visitation nuns were able to merge with this new community and become a stronger, more vibrant community. From thenceforth, she was known as Mother Duchesne in her local community that she was put in charge of, and Mother Superior oversaw of the overall community life. She was given several tasks over the years in France. She worked in several schools and different assignments that she was given in different locations in France. And she was living the life of a sister all the way up to about the age of 50. And she finally, and she still had not gotten to realize her dream to go be a missionary in the New World with the Native Americans. But she had been living the life from a sister, doing what the Lord had asked her to do, being obedient to what she was being called to at the time, serving in schools and various duties. But around the age of 50, there was a bishop, Bishop de Burgh. He was in charge of a large territory in the United States in the New World. The Louisiana Purchase had just happened, and he was given charge of a huge territory to oversee with help that was greatly needed. He needed priests and sisters in great numbers to help him in this vast area that he was beginning to set up at the frontier of the New World. And so he came to France, and Philippine she got word that Bishop de Burgh needed help in the New World. And she got down on her knees and pleaded and begged with Mother Superior, please let me go to be a missionary in the New World to the Native American. And she was granted out permission, thanks be to God. And she, with some other sisters, began to get ready for their journey across the sea. That takes us to our next window. St. Philippine, along with 4 other sisters, boarded a ship. The ship was known as the Rebecca. The Rebecca was a United States ship that they boarded, and they left Europe and went across the ocean to the New World. When groups come to visit, I like to ask them, how long do you think it took at that time by boat? And I usually get some pretty good guesses. Actually, I had no idea. But just to let you know, it was about 2.5 months from Europe to the New World by boat at that time, 2.5 months. And when you left, you saw land at first when you left, and you saw land when you arrived. But the vast majority of the journey, all you saw was water and sky. That was it. And there was no getting off, right? Once you're on, that's it. And once they got on the boat and set sail, the conditions, thanks be to God, we have better conditions on boats now, but at the time, the conditions were very harsh, very difficult to endure. The odor was reported as being very difficult to endure. The heat of the sun was scorching them on those particular days. And they also faced the threat of storms. Obviously, storms are never fun, but especially when you're at sea, storms can be quite treacherous, even life-threatening. And they did in fact face some very difficult storms along the way. Not only that, is they of course had food to supply them the whole time, but the fresh food eventually ran out, of course, after that long of time. And so Philippine, without fresh fruit and vegetables, she had a lack of vitamin C, and eventually she developed scurvy, and she became very sick. By the end of her trip, she had become quite ill and required quite a bit of rest and recuperating to get over her sickness from scurvy. All of the sisters, including her, were also seasick from the journey. And not only that, but once they were on the journey, Another thing that they faced that was dangerous and perilous was, believe it or not, they actually encountered pirates. And obviously, pirates were not a safe thing to encounter on the sea. Pirates were known for robbing, stealing, and even killing. And so this was a threat that they actually came upon. Pirates were coming upon them, and because the Rebecca ship that they were on was an American ship, thanks be to God, they were allowed to pass without it being attacked by the pirates. After 2.5 months, they finally arrived in New Orleans. And as they got off the ship, you can see this depiction of Rose Philippine. She is sick, literally sick, and she's bending over, kissing the ground and praising God and thanking Him that she has, by His providence, that she has arrived safely and with along with the other sisters. They celebrate a mass of thanksgiving, praising God for their safe arrival, and they renew their vows at this time. When they arrive in New Orleans, there's a group of Ursuline sisters that take them in and nurse them back to health, especially Philippine, who is quite sick at this time. After they've been cared for by the Ursuline sisters for some time in New Orleans, they then make their way up the Mississippi to St. Louis, where they're going to meet with Bishop DeVerve. And so they'd get on a steamboat and go up the Mississippi River, which also was a very perilous journey. They could run into sandbanks, they could run into debris in the water. And this was a new technology to begin with. And so making their journey up the Mississippi was a challenge. And I like to ask people too, how long do you think that took to go from New Orleans to St. Louis up the Mississippi River on a steamboat? And it was about 40 days. So a little over a month, they were on this boat. Once again, a perilous journey, but they actually enjoyed the journey because it allowed them a chance to look on the landscape as they went up. And they saw things along the landscape that they had never seen before now that they were in the new world. And they really enjoyed their trip as they made their way. Once they arrived in St. Louis, Bishop DeBerg greeted them, but he didn't have a provision set for them because obviously he had such a territory on his plate to manage and to take care of. He hadn't been able to make provision for them when they arrived. He eventually was able to ask them to go to St. Charles, Missouri. And that was not what they had anticipated. They were expecting to go to St. Louis and to be with the Native Americans. But the bishop asked them to go to St. Charles, Missouri, just west of St. Louis, because he needed them to help with school children, with American and French school children were in need of help. And so he asked if they would go and help in that area, which was, again, was not what they had planned or expected, but out of obedience, they went and did so. And that takes us to our third window. Our third window takes us to St. Charles, Missouri. Some of you, perhaps all of you, may have been to St. Charles, or perhaps you passed through it. If you go from Kansas City to St. Louis, you will drive through St. Charles, Missouri. It's a suburb west of St. Louis. And today, if you go there, there's stores and shops and homes. It's a very nice area. But at the time, it was the frontier. There was nothing out there. And as St. Philippine and the other sisters made their way to St. Charles, Missouri, she felt like she was at the end of the world. And the conditions that she faced on the frontier were scarce food, scarce supplies, scarce funds, uh, very, very hot summers, very cold winters. Obviously, of course, without the air conditioning and heat that we were blessed with today. But she was able to set up the school that she provided for children. And this was the first free school west of the Mississippi that she established in St. Charles, Missouri in 1818. In this window, you see the schoolhouse behind St. Philippi, and you see the sun shining down as blessing from the as she carries out this work of service that the Lord has asked her to do. You see her with two children, two school children. One of the children is well dressed, a well-to-do child. The other child has no shoes, a poor child. And she's tending to both. She's caring for both. She's teaching both. And you'll notice that the poor child has a key, that she's giving a key to the poor child. This is the key of education to help lift her up out of poverty. This window is very significant because when St. Philippine was canonized in 1988 at St. Peter's in the Vatican, there was a tapestry that draped down from St. Peter's in the Vatican outside. And as you went up and you saw the tapestry, it was an image taken from this window. That tapestry exists still today. It's hanging over her tomb in St. Charles, Missouri. I'd like to next take you over to the window here. We're going to pause for a few moments on the story of St. Philip, but this is an image of the risen Christ. His feet are a little contorted. It's the crucified Christ, but he is risen from the dead. And so this is our Lord crucified and risen. And his good news is being proclaimed to all the nation. On the side windows, you see, on this side here, you see an Eskimo and a Chinese man. On this side, you see a Native American and an African. And behind them are the apostles and saints throughout the generations, all the way down to today, including us, who are bringing the message of Christ to the nation. And so in this three set of windows is depicting the risen Christ being proclaimed down through the centuries out to the nations. And the lower window right here is of particular significance to those who are in the Kansas area, because the state sunflower, of course, is the sunflower. Excuse me, the state flower of Kansas is the sunflower, and we see a P and an X, Cairo. It stands for Christ. So Christ is being brought to Kansas. And so this is particularly identifying the inheritance of the faith that's been brought to this particular area. I'd like to pick up with the story of St. Philippine in this window over here. As you can imagine, St. Philippine, as she was setting up schools, so she set up a school in St. Charles, Missouri. She also set up a school in Ferguson. Is it Ferguson? I believe it was Ferguson, Missouri, and then also St. Louis, as well as Louisiana. And as she was going around setting out schools, she continued to face challenges. Beginning something new with anything is a challenge, especially on the frontier, as she faced continued scarce supplies, scarce funds, not knowing exactly what to do or how to go about it. And even in the midst of carrying out the life of a school, there were challenges and administrative difficulties that she faced. And so she had been living this life from around the age of 50 to about the age of 70. She was doing what she had been asked to do by the bishop, by setting up schools and teaching the children in the schools that she was arranging in the frontier. And in her schools that she set up, some of the schools were day schools. The kids would go home. Some of the schools were boarding schools, so the kids would be there all the time. And obviously, just like today, kids get sick. It happens, right? Kids get sick all the time. It's just the way it is. And no different back then. And so for the kids that were boarding, she would be very much directly involved quite often in caring for the sick children at the school. And so this window depicts her in that loving service. I'd like to take you now to this window. St. Philippine, after she had been serving on the frontier in the harsh conditions of that area for about 20 years, setting up schools and working in those schools and all the challenges that presented to her, she finally retired around the age of 72. And at this point in time, living that life on the frontier, her health had deteriorated, and she was not able to carry out the work that she had done before. And so at the age of 72, as she was sitting in her convent retired, there was a Jesuit priest that came into the convent, and the Jesuit priest said, "I need your help. I need sisters to join me." This Jesuit priest had just come from a mission in Sugar Creek Camp. In Sugar Creek, Kansas, the Jesuit priest had set up a mission to care for the Potawatomi Native Americans who had been resettled to that area. They needed help from sisters to work in the schools for these Potawatomi children. And so this Jesuit priest came pleading and imploring help from the sisters that they might be sent to help him in the mission territory. And Sister Philippine, retired in poor health, sat back in the corner with a tear coming down her cheek because this is her lifelong dream. Her lifelong dream had been to go on mission with with the Native Americans to bring Jesus to them. And she didn't think she was going to be able to go because she's now retired and in poor health. But the Jesuit missionary that came and made the request said, St. Philippine must go with us. Obviously, her name was not Philippine at the time. It was Mother Duchesne. And he said, Mother Duchesne, she must go with us. Even if she has poor health, she must come with us. If all she can do is pray for us, she will ensure the success of our mission. And so she was granted permission and went to the Potawatomi mission site at Sugar Creek, Kansas, about 20 miles from here. When she arrived, she had a very difficult time learning the language. She had a tough time with language in general, especially the Potawatomi language. It was a very difficult language, and she tried to do as best she could, but she could not learn the language. And so she had a hard time not only with her health, but also just interacting with the Potawatomi because of the language barrier. But there's something that she was able to do that I think we all have experience and understanding in this, that regardless of language barriers, you can still communicate love to someone, even if you can't communicate verbally with them, because love is universal. No matter what language a person speaks, you can communicate love to them by serving them, by kindness, by acts of generosity. And St. Philippine was able to do that. Despite she did what she could to teach them, she did what she could to teach them life skills that they could learn and put into practice. But one of the main things that she was able to do, despite her lack of communication, was she was able to love them. And she demonstrated that love in a powerful way to the Potawatomi as she served them with her heart. And this was her lifelong dream. Her lifelong dream was to be among the Native Americans. And at the end of her life, at the age of 72, she finally had that opportunity. And when she came here, she came from St. Louis area to Kansas City, and then got on a horse and buggy down to this area. And the Native American came out, the Potawatomi came out and welcomed and greeted the sisters as they arrived at the park. And this depicts her life here at Sugar Creek Park. And I'd like to take you just now to this final window in the main area. The final window is a depiction of Philippine with a farmer. Obviously, there are still farmers in this area, but certainly back at that time, there were quite a bit of farming that was taking place in the area. And she would have developed a good friendship and good relationship with the local farmers in the area. There's one last area that I'd like to direct your attention to, and I'll give you some time to kind of walk around here. But this is the final window. It's tucked away in a special corner where we especially honor St. Philippine. We have here a window depicting Philippine kneeling down. Philippine is kneeling down, and there are Potawatomi near her. And there's a story that goes with this window here. And so I'd like to share that story with you just briefly. The story goes like this. St. Philippine, as I said, when St. Philippine went to the park, to the mission site, her health was poor. She couldn't speak the language, and there was very little that she was able to do. But what she was able to do was she was able to love. And the greatest thing that she was able to do was she could pray. Just as the Jesuit priest had assured that the mission would be a success because of her prayers, indeed, she took that to heart. And she devoted herself a great length of time at the park, just a short time from here, about 20 miles from here. She spent a great length of time in prayer, devoted to praying for the Potawatomi, praying for the mission, praying for the church in the world. And she would be seen, the Potawatomi would see her kneeling down in the church in prayer for great lengths of time. They would see her, and then they would go back. They would go away and come back, and they would still see her praying. And they're like, has she been there the whole time? And so they decided to test this out. They had a theory, as much of a theory that this is quite innocent of children, that they decided they were going to put twigs and pebbles on the hem of her garment as she was kneeling down in prayer. And so at night, when she was kneeling down in prayer in the church, they snuck up behind her quietly, put pebbles and twigs on the hem of her garment, and then they came back the next day. And as they came back the next morning, everything was still exactly where they had put it on her garment. She hadn't budged the whole night. She had been praying the whole night, and they started to call her Woman Who Prays Always. This was the nickname that stuck with Philippine, and it's still today her nickname. She's called the Woman Who Prays Always. I would love a nickname like that. Priest who prays always. Please call. I would love that. That great. What a great nickname. So this is the legacy that Philippine left behind right here in Kansas, just about 20 miles away from here, in Mount about 20 miles away from Mound City in the Archdiocese of Kansas City, Kansas, currently today. There's just one last thing that I wanted to close with about the life of Saint Philippine. Saint Philippine, Saint Philippine, after 1 year at the park, she was asked by her superiors to go back. Her health was so frail, and she was having such a difficult time at the park, at the mission site, that her superiors, out of good conscience, her superiors could not allow her to stay. She was suffering so much. And so, out of obedience, St. Philippine returned back to St. Louis, to St. Charles, after 1 year at the park, at the mission site. And just remember, this was her lifelong dream that she never got to do until the very later years of her life. And then after 1 year, she was asked to now have to go back. And this was very painful, obviously, for her uh, to have to return back. But she did. She returned back to St. Charles and devoted herself to prayer there until the end of her life. She ended up living another 10 years and then passed. And in her passing, it was almost instantly known that she was probably going to be a saint. I just want to close with this thought. If there's one thing that you might take away from her life that I have found very inspiring, and I think can be inspiring for all of us, this is the one thing I might share with you to take away from her life. Many things, but in particular, I think this is quite helpful for us. That when she went back to St. Charles, she felt like she was a failure. Um, so we just walked through her story, through her life, and as she was reviewing her story, as she was reviewing her life, she felt like she was a failure. And I found that very striking when I read that and learned that. But if you think about it, if you put yourself in her shoes, it kind of makes sense. As a little girl, she wanted to be a nun. Her father didn't let her because he didn't quite understand. Once she finally became a nun, they closed down the convent during the French Revolution. She had to go back home. Once she finally went back, the convent was in shambles. She couldn't get started again. Once she finally got to another convent, the Sacred Heart Sisters, she was asked to do other things that she hadn't planned on doing. And it wasn't till the age of 50 she finally got to go to the New World. And once she did, she had a terrible time getting there by boat. And once she got there, she was very sick. And once she arrived in St. Louis, they had a different plan for her. And so, out of obedience, she carried out that plan. But it wasn't quite what she had anticipated. And it wasn't till the end of her life she finally got to go where she had always dreamed and hoped to do so. And she could only stay there a year and had to return back. And so, if you kind of look back, all the setbacks, all the challenges, all the hardship, you can kind of see why she felt like she was a failure. But I want to tell you, brothers and sisters in Christ, seriously, was she a failure? And I think we all know what the answer is to that. The church solemnly answered that question for us by officially declaring her not only beatified, but a canonized saint of our church. She was by no means a failure, and neither are you. Neither are you, neither am I. All of us will face setbacks. We probably already have. All of us will face setbacks and hardships and challenges in our life. But I want to encourage you and point you towards St. Philippine, because St. Philippine, despite the hardship, despite the setbacks, She never stopped. She kept persevering and remained faithful to Christ despite all the hardships she faced, and God blessed her tremendously. And God does the same for you and for me as well. Whenever we face setbacks, and certainly we will, and we have, and we will, and we are, and we will in the future. But no matter what setbacks we face, we can be encouraged by that life of Saint Philippine to persevere, to remain faithful to Christ, and Christ truly will bless us, just as he blessed Saint Philippine, and he will help us to be a saint as well, each in the unique way that God is calling us in our life to be a saint as well. God has wonderful good that he wants to work through each of us. And just as he did with St. Philippine, so too he will work through our life as we remain faithful to Christ in our lives and our circumstances today. And so, just in closing, I wanted to share the beautiful statue of Philippine here. And there is a first class relic that is over here that's available. And by the way, if you wish to come and visit the shrine, as a number of you are here today, thank you. We're so glad you're here. And those who are unable to have physically visited today, if you wish to come down and visit at another time, please know you're always welcome. And the paintings up here in the sanctuary show the Jesuit priest and the nuns arriving at the Potawatomi mission site, and they were painted by Ursuline nuns in Paola. The Ursuline nuns have a great connection to us, and so the Ursulines of Paola, two of them came and painted these murals as well as our stations in the church. I'm going to pass over now to you. Larry Lemon is our park manager. We call it our park. It's the Memorial Park of St. Philippine. It's where she actually lived, about 20 miles or so from here. And so I'd like to hand it off to Larry now. And if you come to visit, we weren't able to go out there today because of the weather. But if you're able to come back sometime, you're welcome to the church. You're welcome to the park as well, to see the actual site where she lived with the Potawatomi. And Larry Lemon, if you could please share a little bit more about the park, about the actual site where she, uh, an officially canonized saint, lived. Hi, again, my name is Larry Lemon. Uh, when they began to realize that Mother Duchesne was going to become Saint Duchesne, in 1988, they started acquiring the land where the Sugar Creek Mission was. It took them 2 years to do it. Some local families got together and bought that land, and they donated to the Archdiocese of Kansas City. The park currently consists of 168 acres, and to help you realize the size of that, 160 acres would be perfectly square. Each side would be a hat lot. We're not square, a little bit larger. It's about 2.4 miles around the park. There's a lot of really interesting historical things that happened there. One, his father said, that's where St. Rose Philippine Duchesne lived. She is in Kansas. And she was there because she was invited in by the Jesuits because they had a Potawatomi mission here. And the Jesuits were there because that's where the Potawatomi mission is. Potawatomi had a reservation. They had a village there. The reason why they had that village there is because that was the end of a trail of death for the Potawatomi Indians. It's a very historical thing. It's probably rated one of the top 12 things that happened here. There's also a Catholic Potawatomi cemetery there. There's approximately 648 graves there. I've identified 3 chiefs that are buried there. And it's interesting, the age range of the people buried there is everything from 1 day to 100 years old. There's also a historical Fort Scott, Oregon Trail that was in the park. And before all of that, there was an Osage Indian village at the park. As father said, she was known as a woman of great bones. And
What she was doing was saying a prayer while it was Father Van Haven, I believe, was asking for her to come to the park. And if it would, Father, I think, I read the prayer someplace. Here's your prayer for December prayer. This is prayer she said when coming, when the decision was being made to come to the park.
Lord, you alone are the center in which I find rest. Give me your arm to support me, your shoulders to carry me, your breast to lean upon, your cross to uphold me, your body to nourish me. In you, Lord, I sleep and rest in peace. Amen.
And that was the prayer she said. I'd like to talk a little bit about the power of prayer. And I'm going to tell you the story about Sister Virginia Pearl's family. Sister Virginia Pearl was up in the town, McPherson, Kansas. She just recently died at the age of 93. I've met her nieces and nephews, her great nieces and nephews. And everyone I meet had a strong Catholic belief. You could just tell it. And the reason why one of them told me was because of the active prayer life they had within that family. And that prayer life was handed down to them from Sister Virginia Pearl's grandmother. When her grandmother was a young girl, she became an orphan. And she walked on the Trail of Death, forced march of 660 miles over 61 days from Twin Springs, Indiana, to Grand Lakes, Indiana, to our mission. And when she got there, they changed her name to Life because she was one of the few children that made the journey, survived the journey. And when she was there, she was taught how to pray. Guess who? By St. Rose Philippine Mission. And that tradition has been handed on now for generation after generation. I think it's really important that everybody prays. It's not so much what you pray for. It's the fact that you do pray. I'd like to tell you another story. This is not related to the choir. This is my favorite story. There was a young priest. He hadn't been a priest very long. It was World War II for him. And he wanted to go support the boys. So he went to his bishop up in Des Moines, Iowa, and asked for permission. He went to an Army recruiting station. And when he was there was an airline recruiter talking about the elite fighting force. That supervised offensive support. So he signed up. Was assigned for the 101st Airborne Division. If you're familiar with that, Airborne 101st jumped in behind the enemy lines during D-Day. Before he jumped in, they told him, if you're captured, chances are it may be at least captured. He jumped in, stayed behind and cared for a severely wounded soldier, and he was captured. He shortly found himself in front of the firing squad. He knew he was going to die. There was no doubt about it. He thought, I want to die with at least a prayer in my lips. But he was so scared he couldn't think of any prayer. He said, oh man, heaven was something. And this is a very phallic evening flight. This is what he said. Bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts. Stop so important, but pray for us. In September or October of 1848, the Potawatomi Indians signed a treaty with the government, giving the land back to them. And they acquired a new reservation up around St. Mary's, Kansas. And when they moved, the Jesuits went with them, and the sisters also went with them. They took absolutely everything they could with them, even things that were nailed down, doors, windows, lumber, everything they could, and anything that was left behind, they burned. So there's not much left of the park. But we do have the foundation stones where they lived. And most importantly, in her diary, she talks about a rock that she sat on and prayed. You think we have that rock? And do I have any questions? Please come to the park. We're open from sunrise to sunset. I've done tours for one person up to 160 people. Uh, Probably the most exciting thing that's happened at the park is the schools that are starting to come to the park. Just last week, we had two schools come in. Uh, and the month before, we actually had a public school come to the park, which I thought was really great. And we can attract them in because of all of these sort of things that happened at the park. With that, was there anything I need to cover?
Could you share a word of the church? Could you share about the church?
Yes. This is really interesting. When they first got there, one of the first things they did is they had strong faith. They built the church in a very short time. And then they built the second church, and it was dedicated on Christmas Day in 1841, I think. I might be off on weird too there. But the congregation grew so large that they had to build another church, and that last church was never completed. But the money that was spent to build the church was the funds they had gotten from the federal government. So they were very dedicated. Anything else, Paul?
Do we know where that church?
Yes, we know where the church is. Yeah, sure. Know where the church is. If you come to the park, it's a ways, drive back in there, and over on the left-hand side, there is a big tall cross with 40 feet or more in height. We have an altar here, and that is where the church was.